Today I wanted to talk about why I believe that certainty will kill your magic and why I think you should adopt a beginner's mind. By a beginner's mind, I mean curiosity, a stance of not knowing, even if you are an expert or an adept at magic. The first reason is that if we take a position of absolute certainty about magic, we close our mind to other possibilities. Certainty might come in the form of how magic works or what we feel we should and shouldn't do in regards to a certain situation in our lives that we want to address with magic. Of course, there are people who are more experienced in this area, and perhaps the further along we go in our magical practice, it becomes harder to step back and adopt that curiosity. But I think what certainty can create is a bit like tunnel vision. We see what we believe to be the ending or the goal, and we can't see anything outside of that. We can't see the other possibilities that might be available to us. And so therefore, maybe we restrict our magical practice because of that. The other reason why a beginner's mind is helpful in magic is that it can help you to discern opportunities. In some of our magical workings, it may be important for us to keep an eye out for things coming up afterwards. I've said this before, that magic often manifests in ways that we don't expect. It certainly has for me anyway. Particularly when I've done the financial transformation magic, one of the rituals was around being able to discern those opportunities so that you can take them when they are presented. Because if you don't take them, you might miss out on the magic manifesting if you don't grasp onto that opportunity when it presents itself. Another related aspect of this is that you might miss the signs that your magic has worked. I myself have been quite fixed and quote unquote certain of how I want my magic to manifest, or I've had an image in my mind about how the magic might manifest. And the difficulty is that when it has manifested, I have almost missed it. It's taken me a little while to realise that, that was the magic working, because it's come up in a way that I didn't expect. And also not just magic, but maybe signs out there in the world that things are shifting, or that our call for something to happen or our workings for something to happen, those things have been heard, they are being acknowledged. There might be very subtle signs out there in the world as we go about our daily lives. And again, if we've got too fixed ideas of how those signs will come up, we might not recognise them even if they're right in front of our faces. Another reason to adopt beginner's mind with your magic is that not doing so means you might attribute magical failures to factors other than yourself. So I mentioned this in a video about why your magic might not be working. And one of these things is something I'm not really sure of, is that maybe the spirits or the entities that you've called upon just don't want to work with you. And I'm not saying that that's not true. I've never experienced a sense of that being the case. So I'm not saying it's not true. And also I think the danger of thinking that might be that we don't reflect on maybe where we went wrong, or we didn't do quite what was needed in our magic. Instead, we just shift the responsibility or the reason for that onto something or to someone else, and we don't look at how we might want to do our magic differently in future. Making mistakes in magic and getting things wrong and our magic not working is going to happen, but unless we take the opportunity to reflect on our part in it, we're not going to be able to refine our magic. If we're very certain about magic, or maybe we think, right, this is definitely going to work, and when it doesn't, it might be really difficult for us to admit that maybe we did something wrong, or we did something in a slightly different way than it should have been done. It might be a bit of a dent to our ego. I know myself that having to acknowledge my mistakes, it can be pretty painful, but I think through that process we can learn a lot better and perhaps be able to get better at magic so that we can get more consistency of results. Another benefit of adopting a beginner's mindset is that you allow for all types of magic. And what I mean by this is that we may think that simple magical practices are less powerful than the more complex and ornate ones. Sometimes in my magic, I prefer a more minimal approach with minimal materials and paraphernalia and what have you. And there are other magical workings where I've wanted a bit more to it. Candles, incense. I can't tell you why some magical workings make me want to bring in more materia than others. It's just a feeling I get as to what I think will be appropriate. But a path that we all might go down if we're not careful is that we write off those simple magical workings. We might think that in order to get a really powerful result, it has to be a very elaborate ritual, lots of materia. But I'm sure a lot of us have done both types of those things, especially maybe when starting out. You might not have had a lot of paraphernalia to do magic magical workings with. Maybe some of you did dive in with more elaborate rituals, but at some point I imagine we've all tried the more simple stuff. And let's face it, you could always start off doing a simple version of a working, and if you don't feel it was effective, try and make it more elaborate and see what happens. The next reason for adopting a beginner's mind, a more curious, not knowing stance, is a bit related to the last one, is it puts you in a psychological space of experimenting rather than getting too fixated on doing the same old things. Now, if you have certain magical workings that are absolutely reliable all the time, then it's probably best not to change those. You want to stick with those as much as possible. But maybe we can get a bit too comfortable in the way that we do things. We get fixated on certain ways of doing things. Maybe trying something new feels a bit uncomfortable. Maybe it's stepping outside our comfort zone. And so being open to new ways of doing things and being curious about finding out if new ways of doing things might help our magical practice, that's going to help shift us into that curious space, a bit like you might call it a curious scientist with their Bunsen burners and liquids and, just seeing what happens with all the chemicals that they mix together. Having fun with it, obviously being safe with your magic, not putting yourself or other people at risk of harm, but having fun, that childlike curiosity that we all had at one time. And I think we tend to kind of disconnect with it as we get older, which is a shame. But I think Magick is really a chance to re-engage with that and connect back in with that. So if you catch yourself feeling absolutely certain about something in Magick, maybe take a step back and go, let's pretend I don't know everything for a few moments and see how that feels and see where that takes you, see what roads and avenues that takes you down mentally, psychologically, and then where you end up with your magical practice. Let me know in the comments if you've been able to adopt a more beginner's mind, a more curious mindset, and how that has worked for you. Take care, be well, and I will speak to you again soon.